Right. Thanks ever so much. And thank you ever so much, everybody, for coming along to, 4 o'clock on a Thursday, as I was saying to Mandy, is not a great time. We should be almost getting ready for the weekend, but hopefully you've all had an all right day and not too hectic. I know what it's like working from home. I've just been injecting Calpol into one of my children and trying to cook a shepherd's pie at the same time. And that's just what it's like at the moment, isn't it? Balancing everything. So my name's Jenny, and I'm going to talk to you today about providing advice and guidance and basically how that fits in with perhaps going for a Quality and Career Standard Award, but also a little bit about kind of what guidance is. So to give you a bit of my background, I've worked for Complete Careers for 6 or 7 months now, since September. And previously to that, I was working as a careers leader in a school. And sort of before I started that role, I'd started my postgrad diploma in careers guidance. So I'm a guidance professional myself. And then before that, I had a lot of time off with my kids, but I worked in HE and careers before that at St Andrews University. I used to live in Scotland. So yeah, that's me. And so I'm here to talk to you about providing advice and guidance. And I was nervous about doing this session, but I thought, don't be nervous, because this is the stuff that, is my bread and butter. And I do really think guidance is super important. So the aim of this session is to support you to gain a full understanding, basically, of what careers guidance is and how it fits in with the attainment of the Quality and Career Standard Award. Careers guidance might be something you're very familiar with. You might even be a guidance professional yourself. I know I've got people here who are teachers, some careers leaders. Some of this may be fairly obvious, but I think it's still worth thinking about what actually is guidance, and therefore why does it have a value? And then really what it is in terms of you need to be doing to be thinking about moving forward with a Quality and Career Standard Award. And I'm an assessor for CareerMark, doing the Quality and Career Standard Award. But I think even if you're looking at going with another organisation, you'll find that the advice is really fairly similar. Okay, so what is careers guidance? It may seem obvious, but I think it's worth starting with this. So the OECD says that careers guidance is services intended to assist people at any age and at any point throughout their lives to make educational, training and occupational decisions and to manage their careers. Okay, so it's saying that it's services. It's not saying specifically at that point that it's one-on-one interviews. It's saying that any service that's intended to assist people, and key here, at any age, throughout their lives to make educational, training and occupational decisions and to manage their careers. So it's about thinking, okay, what kind of jobs might be right for you? What kind of educational choices should I be making next? It's fairly obvious. This is what we know careers guidance to be. But if we think about managing careers, that's something slightly different. And if we look further down here, the next quote is telling you kind of what career management is, according to Jarvis, who is a kind of a career scholar. And careers management is not about making the right occupational choice. It's about equipping people with the competencies to make a myriad of choices with which adults are confronted with continuously and lifelong. So there's a lot of stuff in there. I think there's a misconception quite often, particularly amongst people perhaps of a slightly older generation, that careers guidance was about you sitting down with somebody and then telling you what job or what career you would have for the rest of your life. And I still think you come up against that preconception, perhaps amongst parents, sometimes other teachers in the school. And there's sometimes a frustration or a problem with expectations that someone thinks they will go for a careers interview and come out with a career life plan. And of course, that's just not ethical. I could never meet, a young person for 45 minutes and tell them exactly what to do with the rest of their life. It is about helping them make choices that are coming up, what they should do next, what they could consider. But it's basically helping them, equipping them. And I think really they're equipping them probably with the right attitude. And I think attitude is the key word here, so that they will kind of make those decisions throughout their life. They will be empowered and positive and excited to make those decisions for themselves throughout their whole life. So a really good careers intervention with a young person might make them think about their values, might make them think about what it is they want in life. And by doing lots of different things, you might hopefully support them in a way that will go far into the future. It's not just about what they're going to do next. If I was to say to someone, I think, engineering will be right for you, then it may very well be so, but it might not be. And they're going to take that one piece of information away with them out of a guidance session. And then perhaps in 4 or 5 years, they realize it's not right for them, and they're stuck and they don't know what to do next. So just giving somebody that job, giving somebody that occupation is not enough. It's about encouraging them to be really good career managers themselves. So this slightly cheesy 1980s, 1990s, this quote was around a lot. I think one of the major charities like Oxfam used it, but it's a perfect way to think about careers guidance. And it's a good quote to share with your learners actually as well. Give a man to fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man how to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. So it's the sense that if I give somebody one occupational idea, or I share with them one idea, or I get them onto one website, that's going to help them over the next step in the next few weeks. But by encouraging them to themselves proactively seek out websites that will be right for them, or by encouraging them to think in a certain way about their career and who they are and what's right for them, you're going to help them to make decisions that will go hopefully throughout their life. So a careers guidance interview, in a way, has just as much pressure on it as it did perhaps when people considered it to be, you know, a simple case of finding the right career for a person. There's a lot of pressure to kind of give that individual a really meaningful encounter that they will take forward, you know, for a long time. So I'm not going to ask you to share your own feelings with this, but I'd like you to think about the following questions, and I'm going to give you a bit of an idea about my background. So I want you to think about, when was your first career guidance experience? So when, if and when, did you have your first careers interview? Who gave it to you? When is the last time you benefited from careers guidance? And at what time do you think it would have been most helpful to have some careers guidance or a careers interview? That could be right now, I don't know. Think about those questions. So if I give you an idea of what I'm thinking, when my first careers guidance experience was, I think it would have been in year 11 of secondary school for me. Who offered it? It was given to me by a geography teacher who had a large remit for careers, but was not a qualified careers professional. When is the last time I benefited from careers guidance? Just under a year ago, when I was thinking about leaving the job that I was then in. I got access to brilliant free kind of 30-minute telephone consultation with a careers advisor, and obviously I would have to have paid if I'd wanted more time with her. And at what time do I think it would have been most helpful? It would have been probably most helpful at my third year of university, when I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I did actually go to the careers office and say to them, I think I should be a teacher. But I think if they had scratched below the surface a bit, challenged me in different ways, they would have realised that I hadn't really thought it through and it wasn't really what I want. Not their fault. It might have just been me not listening correctly. They'd probably seen 20 students that day, but that's certainly time I would have benefited from a better careers interview maybe, or a really decent careers intervention. And this is, I just get you to think about this, because I think, you know, it's really important when you think about careers guidance and supporting young people to try and remember what you were like at that age, or what you were like at different points throughout your career. And I think it's quite good sometimes to share that with young people as well, if you are involved in any career learning. So history of guidance, and I'm going to be brief and go through this, but I just want to give you a sense of how things have changed, because again, it's maybe something you know, it may be not something you know, but typically, you know, pre-1990, pre-90s, you know, guidance was delivered by head teachers or by heads of sixth form or by tutors. And that's not to say that that doesn't have some kind of merit. I think, you know, some kind of advice given by other professionals within the school can be really excellent. But I also do often get students who say to me, oh, well, you know, Mr. Smith said that there's no way I could be a vet because I'm rubbish at maths. Or Mrs. Parry told me, you know, there's no way I should go into tourism because COVID's got rid of all the tourism jobs. And so you've got to be very careful, I think, if you are having these kind of interactions, career-related interactions with teachers, students, which you will do, and you know, tutors will always talk about this kind of thing, and it's good that they do. But there is a place for having that delivered by a professional who knows about career guidance, because students particularly will take away little nuggets of information, or they will take away messages, and sometimes it's not always helpful, and sometimes you've got to be very careful about how you deliver them. And I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. So subsequently, after the 90s, they were delivered by careers advisors employed by Connections. Many of you might remember Connections, which was obviously a free service of schools. But after the 2010 budget, I think, and the cuts that kind of subsequently came from that, careers guidance, dropped off for many schools. And most recently, it's been delivered often by freelance advisors or occasionally in-house teachers or qualified staff in the school, if at all. And I think we have to see that there's probably a very large chunk of people now in their 20s who have never had a careers interview at all, because of that. But then we get Gatsby benchmarks coming in and the following DFE guidance, which I'm going to talk about later. And it gives significant weighting to careers guidance as being important. But having said that, it's equal weighting with other areas as well. There are 8 benchmarks in total, and personal guidance is just one of those elements. So if we look to the future, and we don't know what's going to happen, but I think we're going to see an increase in demand. I think there is an increase in demand for careers guidance in schools delivered by careers advisors. And I think there's going to be a shortage of supply, perhaps. I think a lot of careers professionals who perhaps worked at Connections in the past are retiring. And there's going to be some schools who want to buy in careers guidance, but are struggling. And I know there are schools who are struggling to find it. Maybe a return to public sector offer, I don't know, I would like to think so. And potentially more remote guidance. And I think, COVID has made us realise that perhaps, if a school is quite remote and it's a struggle to get an advisor in there, perhaps there's ways that we can offer it remotely, and a different model might work in the future in different schools. So again, I know I've got some people in guidance here, but many of you aren't. So I just thought I'd run through what a guidance interview looks like. Potentially schools are considering spending hundreds, if not thousands of pounds buying in guidance from advisors. And so it's good to have a sense of actually what does a guidance interview look like? And this is what it should look like. So it has, you meet the students normally in a room. Obviously at the moment, it's all Teams or Zoom or whatever, remotely. You're greeting them, you're introducing yourself. You're moving on to discuss confidentiality. So that's very important. You're not gossiping about what you are talking with them about with your family or in the staff room. It's between you. You talk about action plans. So you're saying, okay, I'm going to be taking notes from this interview to make an action plan, and you tell them who will see that action plan. That's really important. So they understand to what extent the conversation is confidential, to what extent some information is being passed on. And then you're building a rapport with young people. So this is tricky. You've got to get them to open up to you very, very rapidly, and really build up that relationship, and so that they trust you, so that they want to tell you all sorts of things about yourself within a 40-minute session. Because most advisors don't have the sort of luxury of relationship building. I was very lucky in my old school as a careers leader and a careers advisor that I knew the students very well. But currently when I'm going into schools, I see 170 students over 4 months, and I may not ever see them again. It's very rapid. So the next part of the interview, you're exploring and you're trying to understand them. You're trying to work out where they are, where their position is. You're asking them about their hobbies. You're asking them how they feel about leaving year 11. And you're basically building up a conversation. Sometimes at this point, conversation goes down a particular avenue. They're interested in a career. Sometimes it's a slow process of talking about who they are and their strengths and things. At every point, you are looking for emotions. You're looking for words like scared or worried, things like not sure. You're checking all the time to see how they feel about their career, because that is going to really influence their attitude to it. You are listening, you're pausing. I'm a bit of a talker, but listening is very important. So I have to really bite my lip and just sit and listen very carefully. Listening very carefully to individual words that students are using, really picking out those words. And you're checking for position. This is really important. So you are, you're trying to work out where they are in their career journey. So a student might come to you and say, I want to be a fast jet pilot. Well, okay, let's check what he knows or she knows about that. So if they want to be a fast jet pilot, okay, well, one student might have wanted to be a fast jet pilot for 4 years. They have been on the RAF website several times. They know about fitness and training needs. They've been down to the Army Recruitment Office. They are in Air Cadets. They are doing other things. They know exactly when they need to apply. They've thought very carefully about how it is that their qualities, how they fit in with that career, They've even thought of some of the downsides of being an RAF pilot, fast jet pilot, and they've thought about a plan B. That's great. They are on their way. Now, that was my husband at secondary school. I went to secondary school with my husband, and that's what he wanted to do, and roughly what he became. And he will always say, oh, my careers interview was rubbish when I was at school. She didn't tell me anything. And that's because he knew it all. And all she needed to do at that point, I know, was check that he had a good understanding and he was where he needed to be. And he was. So hands up, off you go. Great. But you've got the other student who comes in and says, oh, yeah, I'd like to be a fast jet pilot. And you scratch below the surface, and he watched Top Gun last night, but he hasn't given it any more thought or consideration than that. He doesn't know anything about it. He hasn't thought about how it matches with him and his career path. And so that's the one you've got to really check positioning. And that's when they are at a very different point in their career journey. So this is really important. The other thing you're doing is challenging. So you are getting them to think more critically about their career, just in the same way they think critically when they're doing a history essay, or they think critically about their other subjects. If they say, I just want to go to a really good university, you'd be saying as a careers advisor, what do you mean by a good university? What do you think is a good university? You're challenging their values. If they say, you know, my mum's always said I wouldn't be able to do that, again, very sensitively, you're challenging that. Why do you think your mum has said that? Why do you think that's a, you know, it's very, very, you know, it's very tricky, but you've got to kind of be always making those challenges. So moving on, at this point in the interview, you've explored a lot of things. You're now coming to a bit of an agreement and contract. So you're saying to yourself, right, okay, we've talked about these different things. I think for the remainder of the careers interview, we could focus on this, your application to the Air Force. We could focus on this, we could focus on, and you kind of talk about what you could focus on. And then the remainder of the interview is about more information and guidance, and getting them to think about what they need to do next. So again, teach a man to fish. It's not necessarily let's go on the website together, although sometimes you would do that. It's where do you think you could find out more about that? You know, well, I could check out the RAF website. Okay, how do you think you could find out the address of the RAF website? Well, I could Google RAF. And it's getting them to make those connections themselves very much. So again, empowering them to be good career managers throughout their career, rather than just giving them the career and presenting it with them. So then you would agree on action points. So look, okay, at the end of this interview, we've agreed, we think that you could do with doing this, going on this website, doing this careers personality quiz, maybe going to the Army recruitment, the Forces Recruitment Office. Maybe you could do with talking to this teacher about whether you could study chemistry A level, whatever, that's what we're talking about. And then you conclude, and then that is it. Then you're getting on with your notes. So that is what a guidance interview would normally look like. So this model here gives you an idea of what I was talking about earlier in terms of what you're talking about in an interview, and how perhaps somebody who's not qualified as an advisor might be different. So if you look at the spectrum here, we've got directive at the top. Someone who's directive, or an interaction that's directive, is somebody that tells students something. So you need to go on Lincoln College website and apply to Lincoln College. You're instructing, you're giving advice. I think you should do this. You're suggesting, perhaps you could do this, and you're giving them feedback. And in that section, that comes under advice and information. So I think most teachers in schools are able to do this. Tutors, pastoral learners are doing this sort of thing all the time. And it has a great deal of value, particularly when you're trying to support students with their next steps, going to college or whatever. This is where we are. And I spend quite a lot of my time in guidance interviews in this section. But as a guidance professional, I'm moving more to the right-hand side. So I'm asking questions to raise their awareness. I'm making them think about things in a slightly different way. I'm summarizing. So if a student says something like, you know, again, you know, my dad says I could never do that because I wouldn't be any good at it. You know, I'm summarizing those feelings and reflecting them back to him. Again, but reflect a little bit further on. So your father thinks that, your family kind of believes that might not be right for you. Why? And I'm listening. And then if you look at the bottom there, I've moved from advice and information, I've moved over to coaching and to counselling. And so real careers guidance is across that whole spectrum. But real careers guidance, when you've got the time to do it, and when a student really requires it, which some students really do, you know, it really is similar to counselling. It really is about helping them to explore it themselves. And I'd imagine it's quite similar to having, you know, a counselling interaction. So that is to give you, I think, a bit of a sense of, okay, well, I'm not saying a teacher couldn't do the full spectrum of guidance, but I'm saying that as a careers guidance professional, you are being taught that full level and you're taught skills in order to get that full spectrum. And every stage of this has a great deal of merit, but you've just got to be careful that guidance is giving what you intend it to give at the right time. And every interaction is different. Every student needs something different. And a guidance person is a good person to work that out. So I do occasionally use career quotes, and I've just this one in. Oh gosh, go back. Sorry. A career path is rarely a path at all. A more interesting life is usually a more crooked, winding path of missteps, luck, and vigorous work. It is almost always a clumsy balance between the things you try to make happen and the things that happen to you. So I'm not going to talk too much about career theory, but careers advisors learn that, you know, careers are not just about plotting one path. Some people do have quite straightforward careers, and certain careers, such as, for example, medicine, require you to have that kind of direction sometimes. But most people's careers are a bit messy and things happen that we don't always predict. And so it's about, as I said before, kind of giving students the right skills to manage their career throughout their lives, but also actually make students aware that this is what careers are like. You know, they are messy and they are a bit unpredictable at times, but that's, you know, that's life, and that's also what makes them quite fun and interesting. So that's me talking about guidance. Now I'm going to be talking much more about what guidance might look like in schools, what guidance should look like in schools, and then starting to link that much more into the Quality and Career Standard Award. So you may all be familiar with this. It's the Careers Guidance Access for Education and Training Providers, the DfE guidance that came out 3 years ago now after the Gatsby report. And it says that every pupil should have opportunities for personal guidance interviews with a qualified advisor whenever significant study or career choices are being made. Careers advisors can help pupils to locate ambitious education and career options by identifying opportunities and assessing pupils' abilities and interests. So once again, and again, because I'm an English literature student, I like to pick out the words. Every pupil, so every student at the school should have the opportunities or opportunities for personal guidance. So every student should be able to access careers guidance with a qualified careers advisor. I'm going to talk about that later. Whenever significant study choices are being made. So I think there you've got to think about potentially option choices for GCSE options, and obviously post-16 choices, and then post-18 choices. Opportunities is a difficult word. Opportunity suggests that the young people need to know that it exists, that they've got the opportunity. It shows that they need to have an awareness of it and they can access it if they want. But do they? And saying that a young person has an opportunity to do something, I mean, you would never say a very young child has an opportunity to do something necessarily. They need often to be told to do it, or supported to do it, or heavily encouraged to do it. But it does mean that it's certainly a very woolly word. Careers advisors can help pupils to locate ambitious education and career options, so raising aspirations. You know, careers guidance is, you know, potentially a massive sort of agent for social change and social mobility, and we know that we can encourage students to aim high, and quite often for various reasons they are doing themselves down, thinking they can't do things. Sometimes we have to manage expectations and it's the other way around, but very often, and particularly for some schools from sort of lower socioeconomic backgrounds, with you know, students are just never thinking that they can do things, they just never consider it. So we identify opportunities, which we do, we show students the opportunities, and we assess their abilities and interests. I take a bit of umbrage with the word abilities there, because as a careers guidance professional sat in front of say 7 students a day, I'm not necessarily assessing their ability. I'm trying to work out their level of ability, but it's not always an easy thing to do. I'm not their teacher. I normally ask for some context in terms of their academic background, but I wouldn't say that I would be somebody who could identify their ability. I would say I identify their interests and I would explore their abilities. But if you're talking about academic levels, it's a bit more complicated. So the government's expectation, moving on to the next bit, is that every pupil, this is where we get really close, this is what should happen, every pupil should have at least one such interview by the age of 16. So that is saying that all year 11s or year 10s or earlier, potentially, should have a careers interview before the age of 16. Again, we don't really mean age of 16 there, do we think? I think we mean by the end of year 11, I'd imagine. I don't think we're thinking to ourselves, oh gosh, this child turned 16 in September. We've left it too late. But they need to have a careers interview. Now, we're going to talk about how resource heavy it is to provide this, because it is a very big undertaking to provide every year 11 pupil at a large school with a careers interview. But if you think that for the students themselves, you know, one guidance interview is not a great deal to ask, 45 minutes. And I do think there's sort of like a kind of sort of something good about the fact that the DfE came out and said this is something young people should have, because young people will have about 90 hours worth of maths lessons in their final year of secondary school, and they will have one 45-minute interview, if that, where another adult who is qualified will sit down and talk with them about what it is they want in their future, how it is they see their life going, and what it is they might do next. And when you think about that, I really think it's not a great deal to ask, although I do not take for granted how tricky it is to deliver sometimes and how resource heavy it is. But it seems like, when I like that word should, I feel like, you know, I feel the kids should have that. I think it should be a right. And then the opportunity for a further interview at the age of 18. By the age of 18. So again, opportunity, we have to think more about that word. Schools should integrate this guidance within the pastoral system so that personal interviews can be followed up by form tutors or their equivalent, and the personal guidance should be clearly connected with the wider careers programme. So absolutely, if you have got a good careers programme at a school, which is teaching students about apprenticeships, which is teaching young people about self-awareness, then the guidance interviews are much more, they're sort of much easier. The student is much further along already. It's a lot more beneficial. And I'm telling you, as an advisor now who's moving between different schools and seeing year 11 students, you can tell the quality of the careers programme by the interaction. Certainly when you get a few students, you can really see if they've been given that good quality careers education. It comes out in those guidance sessions. I recently assessed a school who said they felt that guidance was like the pinnacle of the experience of careers education at school, and I thought that was quite a nice way to look at it. The school should integrate the guidance within the pastoral system. Absolutely, tutors, heads of sixth form, teachers, they really do all have a part to play in terms of supporting those young people as well. And we're going to talk a bit more about that, because I don't want you to think in any way I'm sort of doing down what they can do and how positive those interactions can sometimes be. But I still think there is a value, which the DfE is saying, for actual qualified advisors giving that advice. So prioritising a should pre-GCSE means that students are supported with their post-16 choices. That's the reason that that's been put in at that point. So students are choosing the right pathways, whether that's apprenticeship, college, T-levels, BTECs at college. They're not limiting themselves in terms of their A-level choices, for example. And it is an important time. And I think it's completely understandable that it's been put in there. Having said that, I would say, as my later point goes, that there's an impact of having an interaction slightly later. I think students have got more maturity if they have it at, say, 17, 18. But and giving A-level students the opportunity suggests they've got to be aware that they can have guidance if they want it, that there is somebody there if they're asked for it, that they know how to book it themselves or who to go to book it. And they should recognise its value to them. You know, if sixth formers, for example, or at college, if they haven't had a positive careers interview before, then they possibly won't seek it out again. So I've said about the impact of maturity. I do think more effective guidance can often be given to students a couple of years later, but obviously sometimes that is too late if they've made a choice about college or A-levels or what have you. So that's why it's definite before in Key Stage 4, and then it's a sort of optional, if you like, or in Key Stage 5. But timing is everything. And when is the best time? I was thinking to myself today, like, when is the best time for a careers interview if you think about those year 11s or Key Stage 4 students? You know, I would say mid-January is the best day. You know, that is when they've come back from Christmas, they've probably done their mocks. Suddenly the end of year 11 is not that far away. They're starting to think about it, but they've still got absolutely plenty of time to go to college open days and things like that. So I would say like 20th of January is the best possible day for careers interview for a year 11. But you can't do it like that, because careers advisors can't see 270 students on one day, you know, and it might be that, you know, you start your careers advisor seeing year 10s later in year 10, or later at the end of year 10, and then going right round to perhaps February, even March time, you know, depending on when they might need to apply for local colleges or apply for sixth form or what have you, and how that fits in with your timescales that you're working at within your school. But timing is important. And again, as a careers advisor, I will see a big difference between the students that I saw early on and the students that I see later in the year in terms of how ready they are. We all know what a massive change happens in young people at that kind of point in their career. So, who should deliver careers guidance? I'm aware I've gone through half an hour. I promised I won't go on for hopefully more than another 20 minutes. Schools should use a qualified careers professional who can be an appropriately trained member of staff. So I think this is something that was maybe a preconception for a while, and because of DfE guidance really suggesting that it should always be offered by somebody who is impartial and external to the school, but we're not really saying that anymore. But it needs to be somebody who is, as it goes on to say now, qualified and therefore registered with the CDI and on the CDI guidance register. So it says here that the Career Development Institute has a developed set of professional standards by careers advisors, which includes the professional register of advisors holding level 6 or higher, and guidelines on how advisors can develop their own skills. And registration shows that a careers advisor is professionally qualified, abides by the CDI Code of Ethics, which includes impartiality, and updates their skills and knowledge by undertaking 25 hours of CPD each year. And adherence to this criteria is monitored by the CDI, and we encourage schools to view the professional register to search for a career development professional who can deliver it. So what we're saying here is in the same way, although not anywhere near as seriously as the way that a doctor would have the Hippocratic Oath just to kind of, you know, look after their patients, you know, as a careers professional and the training you do, you have an oath. If not an oath, then certainly a very much professional obligation, a professional standard to put the client first, put the student at the centre and do what they need. So even if you are working within the school already, you know, you aren't thinking about numbers in sixth form. You aren't thinking about getting the number of kids to Russell Group universities. You are simply thinking about that individual and what they need. And so it's really important that I think it's been seen as being of, you know, a great value, the level 6 qualification. So yes, and that's sort of what is being seen as being the standard for offering careers guidance. It can be an external provider. As a careers leader, you go through some exceptional training about how to deliver and develop a very good careers program, but it's unlikely you will do a significant amount of training in guidance. And the course that I did at Nottingham Trent University, and it's standard across the country, if you do a postgrad diploma in careers guidance, 2 of the 6 modules you do will be about offering guidance interviews. You will have to submit recorded guidance interviews that are heavily moderated. So, you know, guidance, what you say to students in a one-on-one interaction is, you know, heavily assessed and monitored. So I thought we'd just say, what does impartiality actually mean? I struck that word in red from the last paragraph. So it's about giving students a full range of options. So sixth form or alternatives. You're encouraging students to think about every single option, and you're not thinking about anything else other than what might be right for them. And you're challenging assumptions. So schools have different values, which is great and fine, but when you're a careers guidance professional, either working within the school or brought into the school, you are somebody who can challenge some of those values potentially. What do you mean by a good university? Why do you feel apprenticeships are right for you? You are getting them to think very critically about their career and about the process, and not necessarily going on with any aims of the organisation you're in. So it can be a challenge, and it can be a challenge particularly if you work in a school, which I've been in the past, where, you know, the sixth form is struggling, and, you know, you're aware that it's shrinking, and yet when you're sitting down with the year 11s, you know, you're saying to them, oh, have you looked on the local college website? And you've just got to think, you know, you're doing what's best for the student. And impartial guidance, I think, has more than simply an ethical value. You know, it is ethical. It's the only thing you should really be doing, but it also, I think if students see that they're gaining impartial guidance, it might often encourage them to then think, okay, well, I'm getting that at this setting, so I potentially will stay on for the sixth form of the school. And I think it's one of those things where they value that impartiality. And so it's sometimes misunderstood, or there's a general suspicion about it, and I don't think that needs to be the case. So what is classed as guidance? You know, we talked about what a guidance interview looks like. We're saying now that it's a one-on-one session with a level 6 CBI registered advisor, and that's what the DfE is saying. Lasting timeline. Now, I know there's a lot of controversy over this, but I couldn't really find a guide that specifically says this. 30 to 45 minutes. In some of the DfE guidance, 30-minute interviews are being talked about. But I know other advisors who say, look, 40 minutes is the minimum that you should have. I, as I said, previously worked in a job where I knew the students very well, and I thought 30 minutes is often fine. I don't see a problem with that. Now I'm working in a setting where I don't have any relationship with students until I meet them, and I can clearly see now there's a big difference between a 30-minute and a 40 or 45-minute interview. The level of depth and the level of kind of challenge, the level of intervention is very, very different. So I happily do 30-minute interviews, but I don't think they're the same quality, and I'm much more likely to say, okay, they've had an interview, they might need another one. Perhaps 1 in 10 students might need another one, because it isn't enough to really, I don't think, explore in a great deal of depth. But this could mean that it takes just less than 48 days for an advisor to see a gear group of 250 students at 6 students a day. It is extremely resource heavy, and this is something that, you know, where there's not necessarily any budget for it, is a major consideration, particularly when you compare it to accomplishing all the other Gatsby benchmarks. So if guidance is one of those 8 Gatsby benchmarks, and it takes an advisor 48 days, potentially 200, 250 pounds a day you could be spending on guidance, that's an enormous investment in time, an enormous investment in terms of money. Whereas, for example, employer contact, or designing a careers program, or even a trip to a workplace, can sort of tick off another Gatsby benchmark in a much easier way. But I think we can't move away from how valuable it is, just because it's the only intervention that is really personal and is only really tailored at them, and that is the only space they're going to have to really focus on their career in a very, very personal way. So I think it does have value. Obviously, I'm a guidance professional, I'm going to say that, but I don't underestimate how resource heavy it is. But that's not to say that other kinds of intervention don't work. And I think you can, think about shorter sessions, and perhaps 20-minute sessions with sixth formers. You could do drop-in sessions, for example, where students come with shorter inquiries, particularly for sixth formers. You could look at group sessions. If you have, 5 kids who are all looking at apprenticeships, well, you could run a session with them. And again, in that session, you're probably not going to be saying, well, tell me why your dad thinks that apprenticeships are a waste of time, because that's going to be too personal for that level of sharing. But you are going to be showing them apprenticeship websites. You are going to be talking them through what work ready means and getting them ready for that apprenticeship. So they do have value. Sessions with tutors or other staff, again, potentially do have value as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about the level 3 qualification, and that's something that is good. And then sixth form interviews. So, if you do meet all students in year 11 who might want to apply for sixth form, that could be used alongside guidance. So it might be that, and we're going to talk about triaging in a minute, but that is, certain students who raise a concern, either because they're not going to get the grades to stay, or because they still don't know what they want to do, they could then get referred for guidance. So this brings me nicely onto the 2 guidance models, because when it comes to getting the Quality and Career Standard Award, we are very, very aware, as assessors for Career Mark, that it is very, very difficult to give guidance to everybody, and that we are very aware of what used to work and what doesn't work still very effectively. So the triage referral model of careers guidance is basically where students who really need a careers interview are referred to a careers advisor and have a careers interview at the right time. So the advantage of this kind of model is that students can be seen at the time they most need it, and at the day they feel they need it. So a student might think, I need careers guidance. Their parents might email them to school and say, I think they could do some careers guidance. And they're referred and they see an advisor. And that has great merit, because rather than working alphabetically through a list of 250 students, you're seeing the student at the time that they most effectively need it. And it's a good use of resources. The students who need it most are getting it, as long as they are being identified. Staff can have input on the time that students are seen, so tutors, head of sixth form, whoever, head of year 11 can be referring students. And resources are placed when they're most effective. So, you know, it's not a case of necessarily seeing every single student, it's a case of seeing students who most need it. And some students who most need it might need to be seen 2, maybe even 3 times. So in a way, it could be seen as being a better way of resourcing it. And the level 3 qualification, which actually Complete Careers delivers on, which is supporting perhaps a career administrator within the school, or perhaps a librarian, or somebody who has regular pastoral contact with young people, someone who perhaps works year 11 pastoral contact, having a level 3 qualification where they can be giving information and some basic advice to students, but they are part of that triage process of putting them forward for a guidance interview. So we are aware, you know, as assessors, that some schools are still working within this model. Yes, DfE is saying all students should have an interview, but there is merits to still doing it in this way, and there's merits to a blended approach. But the advantage of every student being seen is that, like I said, each student is entitled to that 40-minute session, and in some ways it doesn't feel like too much to ask. It means that every student is seen. Sometimes a teacher might not recognise that a student has career issues. They might think that a student is fairly straightforward. You know, they want to be a doctor, so they're fine, they're sorted. But actually, as an advisor, you might be able to, you know, sometimes challenge that, pick away at the surface and realise that their understanding of it is not great. Perhaps they really wouldn't necessarily be suited for it, and they need to be challenged a little bit about it. So teachers aren't always the best people to work out who needs to be seen by an advisor, and obviously students themselves are not always the best person. Sometimes they will think that they're absolutely fine, but actually maybe their understanding isn't that great and they do need a careers interview. And lifelong engagement really, for everyone, you know, if every student is seen, then every student has the ability or is given that potential to have that interaction which might teach them to fish for a lifetime. So there's 2 models there. And some schools are, you know, most schools are trying to get every student seen in Key Stage 4. But, you know, if you are still using this triage or referral model, it does have merit, it does have value. And I think a blended approach is really what you need. So ideally, all year 11 students are seen, but ideally they are seen when they need to be seen, and they are referred by somebody. At times they are seen at the right time, rather than just simply going through them in alphabetical order, which means that sometimes you might get a student in March who you really could have done with seeing a lot earlier. Just briefly on SEN learners, so careers advisors working with young people with special educational needs or disabilities should use the outcome and aspirations of the EHCP plan. So really, a careers advisor is sometimes very well placed to be at the EHCP meeting and feed into this plan. And similarly, you know, the SENCO at the school, or the sort of TAs potentially who are working very closely with each student, as well as the parents, are the best people to feed into this and help understand where that student is. So as a careers advisor, I like to have interactions with SEN students, ideally with somebody else who knows them very, very well, because that can really, really help. And it's a bigger conversation. And it's good practice for these young people to have their named advisor who can build a relationship with them and better understand their individual needs. And absolutely, I'd like to see an SEN student, you know, potentially more than once, build up a relationship with them, work out what they need in terms of supporting with applications or what have you, and help them even with their transition to college, if that's where they're going next, for example. It requires generally more careers interviews and more people inputting on it. So if we talk about before and after those careers interviews, we need to help learners know what to expect. And that could be by giving an assembly about what a careers guidance session looks like. It could be a lesson, a drop-in, it could be a poster which says this is what a careers interview roughly is like. And then understanding if they find that intervention helpful. So a questionnaire, a survey handed out with their notes, you know, so you get a sense of whether they found it a helpful interaction. So when you are creating these careers notes as a careers advisor, they are useful. They can pick up on important elements within the interview. Sometimes you can forget to mention things and you can add them into the notes at the end and highlight it. They're useful advocacy with their parents. You know, if a student says, I really want to do this, but my parents don't think it's a good idea, well, it's a chance for you to put that voice over. You're putting across agreed actions. So maybe putting these in the student's voice. I will go onto this website. I will check this. Personally, I find it a very reflective and very useful as an advisor. I can reflect on what I've talked about with them. So personally, professionally, I find it really good. And it's also a record. But how much time do you spend on them and who reads them? You know, if you have an hour slot and you spend 45 minutes talking to students, 15 minutes writing them, do you have a 40-minute slot and some 30 minutes talking to students and 10 minutes writing them? Is that best use of your time and the advisor's time that you're going to hire? It's something for you to talk about with them. So I'm going to talk to you now in the last 5 or 10 minutes, particularly about the Quality and Career Standard Award. Now, it may seem that this is only an addition at the end, but I think all that I've talked about will help you understand that it's all relevant. When we come to assessing schools, we know what good careers looks like. We know that not every school can achieve every single bit. We know that you may not be able to get every single year 11 student seen. And what we are looking for, and what other assessors are looking for, is that you've thoughtfully thought, that's rubbish. You've thoughtfully considered how guidance can be delivered and how best to deliver guidance to your pupils. So if you come to do your Compass report, which many of you will have done, it will say here all the overwhelming students or pupils have had an interview with a professional impartial advisor by the age of year 11. Tick. Have you not? If you haven't, then that doesn't necessarily mean you cannot gain the Quality and Career Standard Award. You would get a making good progress in that category, and I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. We'd recognise that you're not seeing all the students. We'd recommend that one of your action points going forward is that all students are seen, but it's not necessarily a barrier. We know that schools are not going to be at this point 100% achieving all the benchmarks. What we're looking for is that you are aware of what good careers provision is and you're doing the best by your learners. Then the second bit here, all the overwhelming majority of pupils have had at least 2 interviews with professional careers advised by the end of year 13. Well, we've said this is wrong because already the DfE guidance has said that sixth formers should have an opportunity for an interview. But Compass says that they should have at least 2 professional interviews. So again, there's a few things about Compass that I don't particularly like, and this is one of them. Ultimately, if you don't tick that box, in my mind, as long as students are aware of their opportunity, and many of them are accessing careers guidance in sixth form, to my mind, you have achieved that benchmark. And so I don't think that should be as it is, but it is that way anyway. Compass is a bit clunky like that. So if we talk finally about that National Careers Quality and Standard Advice and Guidance and through Career Mark, we are looking in advance of assessment day at how you provide guidance, how you provide lots of different things, careers learning, your careers programme, your careers policy. But when it comes to guidance, this is what we're looking for. We're looking for that you have an identification and referral system. So what we mean by that is we want to see that you are prioritising and identifying SEND students at risk of NEET, perhaps seeing them at the end of year 10, having the allowance for them to have a secondary interview. We are looking for the fact that teachers can refer students in sixth form interviews. We're looking for the fact that year 11s can be referred at the right time. We're looking for the fact that parents feel that they can refer students. And we're looking to see that this happens at times, okay? And this is important. So really, like I said before, there is huge advantages to this referral system because it means students are seen as and when they should be. It does rely on a good referral triage system being in place, but it's important for us. We still see its value. And we see its value as well as every student being seen. And so on assessment, that's what we're looking for in advance, and that's the evidence you would provide would the narrative and the evidence would show us that. And then on assessment day, we'd work out if that was kind of happening by speaking with the careers advisor at your school. Perhaps, you know, they might only come into your school 1 day a week, but we'd ideally ask for a 30-minute phone chat with them on the day we come in. And we'd ask the students as well, how was your interview organised? Why did you have a careers interview? And it might be they said, oh, I got dragged out of history. Or it might be they said, oh, you know, I wanted one and I asked for one and I got one. That's what we're looking for. The fact that we've got independent and impartial careers advice, we're looking then to see that there's equity of access. So we're looking then that really all students do have the ability to access a careers interview as and when they want it, in an impartial and timely careers advice and guidance, both from external and internal sources. So again, which is at least one appropriate interview by the end of Key Stage 3 or 4, and the opportunity for a further one at the end of Key Stage 5. So we're looking there really that all students are being seen. But as I said, if they are not all being seen, it doesn't necessarily stop you gaining the award or gaining a making good progress award. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment. we all know that schools are doing their best and working towards it. If you, you know, you will not necessarily have issues if it's not being done fully. So how are the interviews being accessed at Key Stage 3? Are they ever accessed at Key Stage 3? How many, you know, is it just 2 or 3 a year, which is, you know, potentially fine, but do students know that they can get them? And ensuring that sixth formers are aware. So if I was on assessment day here and I'd be saying to year 13s, look, if you needed a careers interview, how would you get one? And I'd be saying to the year 11s, you know, again, how were you seen and how did your interview come about? Coordination and tracking. So who organises the interviews? Basics there. Is someone keeping a spreadsheet? Who is making sure they're all seen? Who's administrating it? Is it the careers advisor? Is it somebody else in the school? Making sure that everybody's being seen and being tracked, and another interview being organised if needs be. And then career action planning, making sure that students, we're looking for maybe examples in this spot of our students being given action plans, one of they've written, whose voice are they in, how are they distributed to students, can students see them? Do they read them? This is a question. I used to write really nice notes and I realized that nobody ever read them. And do they know where they are? Do they know where they're stored? Do they know how to get them back? Do they know what their action points are? And when I come to the actual guidance assessment day, I'd be saying to the year 11s, oh, can you remember what your action points were from your interview you had with Mrs. So-and-so? Or where's your copy of your action plan? Or have you discussed your careers interview with your family? And those are the kind of questions I'm working at to ask to work out whether they are getting as much as they should from that action planning part. So those are the sections. Sorry, the final one there is facilities. So again, quite basic. Is there a office, a room? Is there an appropriate place for those careers guidance interviews to be held? And potentially as well, do students feel there's a place where they can drop in? Is there a place they can go for that careers interview? If they're thinking about careers the night before and then decide they want one, is there a physical book they can sign in? Is there an admin lady or a gentleman, I should say? Is there somebody they can go to? Is there a room they can go to? I think that's sometimes worth knowing as well. So I'm going to talk to you finally now really about that making good progress. So when you come to be assessed for a Quality and Career Standard Award, and my experience is career mark, there's 3 categories that you can fall into. You can either completely gain Quality and Career Standard Award, you can have a deferred decision, which means that you haven't really got enough for us to say that you have got the award, or you've got this making good progress. Now, the vast majority of students will be in this middle category. Schools will be in this middle category, that they are making good progress. Even schools that I've assessed who have identified themselves that they have, you know, 100% across all the benchmarks. Actually, when we look at their evidence and we talk to their learners, we're not looking for fault, but there is still things they can improve on. And we're saying, okay, perhaps they're not 100% there in all areas. And very much, you know, ideally, I think all students should be working towards that guidance that the DfE is saying 100% for year 11s and ample opportunity for beyond. But we know that the money hasn't just arrived on your doorstep. We know that you are having to seek advisors, sometimes with a falling supply of advisors. We know that it's incredibly intensive and really, you know, resource heavy to deliver this. We don't underestimate that. So, you know, it might be that you are fully offering the guidance that is required, in which case, fabulous, brilliant, wonderful. But if you're not, what we're looking for is there guidance available? Is there a qualified guidance person coming into school? Are they offering guidance? Do students know about it? Is it being thoughtfully managed? Are the most important students being seen, and anybody who wants to be seen being seen? Is there an understanding amongst the school of what a professional advisor is bringing? And hopefully I've given you a bit of that this afternoon. You know, they are qualified. There's a reason there is, you know, a professional register of careers guidance professionals. And staff, students, parents refer, and are you listening to the advisor? You know, are you allowing them to feed into the other career elements? I think this is something that's nice to see. You know, as I said earlier, careers advisor is the pinnacle of that careers experience very often. So if they see students who have no idea what, you know, BTECs are, or the difference between BTECs and A-levels, they should be able to feed back into your careers program, really, because they are the ones that can support you with making sure learners are at a much better position before they're seen. Okay, I am sorry I've gone on now. It's 5 to 5. And I feel like I've gone on and on at you. These are some useful links, particularly referencing some of the things that I've been looking at. I would just urge you, if you are working towards the award, don't let sort of issues around guidance stop you. And as I say, just in yourselves, think critically about how it is offered at school, and just, think about the value of careers guidance and why you have it. And make sure you are, as I say, talking to your learners about whether or not they found it useful, for example, and really getting a sense of what's going on in those interviews. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to hang around for the next 5 or 10 minutes, and you can pop them in chat or turn off your microphone. But other than that, I'm very aware that it has been a very long day for you. So thank you very much for coming along.